So your toilet's been running nonstop and you've probably already jiggled the handle a few times, hoping it would magically fix itself. Maybe you even took the lid off the tank and stared at all those parts wondering what in the world is going on in there. Trust me, I've been there, and so have thousands of homeowners who end up calling a plumber for something they could have easily fixed themselves in about 15 to 20 minutes. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the complete process of diagnosing and fixing a running toilet from start to finish. We're going to cover how to figure out exactly what's causing the problem and then how to fix it the right way so it doesn't come back. Plus, stick around to the end where I'll show you a simple trick that can save you from having to replace parts altogether. Let's get into it. A running toilet is one of the most common plumbing problems you'll ever deal with as a homeowner. And here's the good news. It's also one of the easiest to fix once you understand how the parts inside that tank actually work together. You don't need any special skills or expensive tools, just a little patience and the right knowledge. So let's start by understanding what's actually happening inside your toilet tank. Before we start taking anything apart, I want you to understand how your toilet works, because once you know this diagnosing, the problem becomes so much easier. Think of your toilet tank as a simple system with really just three main jobs. First, it has to fill up with water after you flush. Second, it has to hold that water until you're ready to flush again. And third, it has to release all that water quickly when you push the handle down. The fill valve is what lets water into the tank. It's usually on the left side and it's connected to the water supply line coming up from the floor or the wall. When the tank is empty, this valve opens up and lets water rush in. As the water rises, there's a float that rises with it. This float tells the fill valve when to shut off. Once the water reaches the right level, the float triggers the valve to close, and the filling stops. Now, at the bottom of the tank, you've got the flapper. This is that rubber piece that sits over the drain hole. When you push the flush handle down, it lifts a chain that's connected to the flapper. The flapper rises up and all that water rushes down into the bowl, creating the flush. Once the tank empties, the flapper drops back down, seals the drain, and the whole cycle starts over. When any one of these parts isn't doing its job properly, you get a running toilet. Either water keeps leaking out through the flapper, or the fill valve doesn't know when to shut off. That's really all there is to it. Now, let's figure out exactly what's causing your toilet to run. This is the most important step because if you don't diagnose it correctly, you might end up replacing parts you don't need to replace. Here's a simple test I use on every job. Take the lid off your tank and look inside. If the water level is up to or flowing into that overflow tube in the center of the tank, then your fill valve or float is the problem. The fill valve doesn't know when to stop, so it just keeps running. And the excess water spills into the overflow tube and down into the bowl. But if the water level looks normal and sits about an inch below the top of the overflow tube, then your flapper is most likely the culprit. It's not sealing properly, so water is slowly leaking from the tank into the bowl. When enough water leaks out, the fill valve kicks on to refill the tank, and that's the running sound you keep hearing. Here's another test you can do to confirm a bad flapper. Put a few drops of food coloring into the tank water. Don't flush. Just let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. then check the bowl. If you see that colored water in the bowl without flushing, then you know for certain that water is leaking past the flapper. This tells you exactly where to focus. Your repair. I've used this food coloring test hundreds of times, and it never fails. It takes the guesswork completely out of the equation. One more thing to check while you're in there. Look at the chain that connects the flush handle to the flapper. If it's too tight, it might be holding the flapper open just a tiny bit. If it's too loose or tangled, it might not be lifting the flapper high enough for a good flush. Sometimes the fix is as simple as adjusting that chain. You want just a little bit of slack in it. About ½ an inch is perfect. All right, now that we know what's wrong, let's get to work. The first thing you need to do is shut off the water supply to the toilet. Look down at the bottom left side of your toilet and you'll see a small valve where the supply line connects to the tank. Turn this valve clockwise to shut it off. On most valves, you'll turn it until it stops. If you have an older gate valve style, you might need to turn it several times. Once the water is off, go ahead and flush the toilet to empty the tank. Hold the handle down a little longer than usual to get as much water out as possible. You'll notice the tank won't refill now because you shut off the supply. There will still be a little bit of water left at the bottom of the tank. You can soak this up with an old towel or a large sponge. Getting the tank as empty as possible just makes everything easier and less messy. I always keep a few old towels nearby when I'm working on toilets. It's one of those little things that makes the job go smoother. By the way, if you're finding this helpful so far, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future videos where I break down more repairs just like this. All right, let's keep going. Now, let's talk about replacing the flapper, because this is the most common fix for a running toilet. I'd say about 70% of the time, a bad flapper is the problem. Flappers are made of rubber, and over time they get hard and warped, or they develop mineral buildup that prevents them from sealing properly. First, unhook the chain from the flush handle lever. Just slide it off the hook or squeeze the clip to release it, depending on what style you have. Then look at how your flapper is attached to the overflow tube. Most flappers have two ears that hook over two pegs on either side of the overflow tube. You just slide those ears off the pegs, and the old flapper comes right out. Some older toilets have a different style, where the flapper slides down over the entire overflow tube. If that's what you have, you'll need to remove the whole thing by sliding it up and off. Take your old flapper with you to the hardware store. This is important because flappers come in different sizes and styles. You want to match it as closely as possible. A 2-inch flapper is the most common, but some newer toilets use a 3-inch flapper. If you can find the same brand as your toilet, that's even better. But a universal flapper will work fine in most cases. When you install the new flapper, just reverse what you did to remove the old one. Hook those ears over the pegs on the overflow tube. Make sure it sits flat and centered over the drain opening. Then reconnect the chain to the flush handle lever. Here's where a lot of people make a mistake. You want just enough slack in that chain so the flapper can close completely, but not so much that it gets tangled or caught under the flapper. I usually aim for about ½ an inch of slack. If the chain is too tight, the flapper won't seal all the way. If it's too loose, you might have to hold the handle down to get a good flush. Take a minute to get this adjustment right because it makes a big difference. One more thing. Before you install that new flapper, run your finger around the rim of the drain opening where the flapper sits. Sometimes mineral deposits or debris build up there and prevent a good seal. If you feel any rough spots or buildup, clean it off with a scrub pad or an old toothbrush. A little bit of white vinegar helps dissolve mineral deposits. This takes an extra minute, but it ensures your new flapper will seal properly. If your diagnosis pointed to the fill valve as the problem, then this section is for you. The fill valve controls how water enters the tank and when it stops. When it fails, it either runs constantly, lets water trickle in nonstop, or makes all kinds of strange noises. Replacing a fill valve sounds intimidating, but it's actually pretty straightforward. First, make sure the water supply is off and the tank is empty like we did earlier. Now, look underneath the tank on the outside. You'll see where the supply line connects to the bottom of the fill valve. There's a coupling nut there. Use an adjustable wrench or a pair of channel locks to loosen this nut by turning it counterclockwise. Have a small bucket or some towels ready because a little water will drip out. Once the supply line is disconnected, there's another nut on the inside bottom of the tank that holds the fill valve in place. This is called the lock nut. Reach inside the tank and hold the fill valve with one hand, while you use your other hand to unscrew this lock nut from underneath. Some fill valves have a lock nut you can turn by hand. Others need pliers. Once it's loose, you can lift the entire fill valve straight up and out of the tank. When you buy a new fill valve, I recommend getting a universal fit model. Brands like Fluidmaster make fill valves that fit almost any toilet, and they're very reliable. They usually cost between $8 and $15. The new fill valve will be adjustable for height. Before you install it, you need to set it to the right height for your tank. The top of the fill valve should sit about an inch higher than the overflow tube. Most new fill valves have a twist mechanism that lets you adjust the height. Just follow the instructions on the package. To install it, drop the fill valve down into the hole at the bottom of the tank. Make sure the rubber washer is in place on the bottom. Then from underneath the tank hand, tighten the lock nut. Give it another half turn with pliers, but don't over tighten it. You can crack the tank if you go too hard. Reconnect the supply line to the bottom of the fill valve and hand tighten that coupling nut. Again, just snug it up. You don't need to gorilla grip it. The last connection is the refill tube. This is a small flexible tube that comes off the fill valve and clips onto the overflow tube. Its job is to send a little bit of water down into the bowl during the refill cycle. Make sure this tube is above the water line and clipped securely to the overflow tube. If it's shoved down inside the overflow tube, it can cause the toilet to run constantly. Now let's talk about the float, because this is often overlooked, and it's a really common cause of running toilets. The float's job is simple. It rises with the water level and tells the fill valve when to shut off. If the float is set too high, the water level rises too high and spills into the overflow tube. If it's set too low, you won't get a good flush because there's not enough water in the tank. There are two main types of floats you'll see. Older toilets usually have a ball float, which is that round ball attached to a long metal or plastic arm. Newer toilets typically have a float cup, which is a small cylinder that rides up and down on the fill valve itself. For a ball float adjustment is pretty simple. If the water level is too high, you need to lower the float. On most ball floats, there's a screw right where the arm connects to the fill valve. Turn the screw clockwise to lower the arm and the ball. A small adjustment goes a long way, so turn it just a half turn at a time and then test it. Some older ball floats don't have an adjustment screw. In that case, you can actually bend the metal arm down slightly to lower the float. Just be gentle. You're not trying to break it. For a float cup, the adjustment is even easier. There's usually a pinch clip or a screw on the side of the float cup. Squeeze the clip and slide the cup down to lower the water level or up to raise it. Some models have a screw you turn instead. Check your fill valve for markings that show you which way to turn it. The ideal water level is about 1 inch below the top of the overflow tube. Most tanks actually have a water line marked on the inside. If yours does, just set the float so the water stops right at that line. If there's no line marked, just use the 1 inch below the overflow tube rule and you'll be fine. I can't tell you how many times I've fixed a running toilet just by adjusting the float. No parts needed. It takes about 30 seconds once you know what you're looking for. All right, now it's time to test your repair and make sure everything is working the way it should. Turn the water supply back on by turning that shut-off valve counterclockwise. You'll hear water start flowing into the tank. Watch the tank fill up and pay attention to a few things. First, does the fill valve shut off when the water reaches the right level? The water should stop about 1 inch below the overflow tube. If it keeps running or if water is going into the overflow tube, you need to adjust your float a little lower. Second, listen for any hissing or trickling sounds after the tank is full. A properly working toilet should be completely silent once it's done filling. Any noise means water is still moving somewhere and you've got a leak. Third, do a flush test. Push the handle and watch the flapper lift and then drop back down. It should fall quickly and seal completely. If it's slow to drop or doesn't seal, flat check your chain adjustment. Finally, do the food coloring test one more time if you replace the flapper. Put a few drops in the tank and wait 15 minutes without flushing. If no color appears in the bowl, you've got a perfect seal. If color does show up, the flapper isn't seating properly, and you'll need to check it again. Make sure it's centered and that the drain opening is clean. Let's talk about some common problems you might run into and how to solve them. First, if the toilet is still running after you replace the flapper, the most likely cause is that the new flapper isn't the right size or style for your toilet. Flappers aren't all the same. Take the old one back to the store and compare it more carefully. You might need a different model. Also, check that drain opening again for any buildup or damage that's preventing a seal. Second, if water keeps trickling into the bowl very slowly, even with a new flapper, you might have a worn or damaged flush valve seat. That's the plastic or brass ring that the flapper sits on. If it's cracked, warped, or corroded, the flapper can't seal against it properly. You can buy a flush valve seat repair kit that goes right over the old seat. It's a lot easier than replacing the whole flush valve. Third, if the fill valve makes a loud humming or vibrating noise, it's usually caused by debris caught in the valve or a worn seal inside. Try this. Turn off the water and remove the cap from the top of the fill valve. Most caps twist off or have a tab you press to release. Then turn the water on for just a few seconds to flush out any debris. Put the cap back on and test it. If it still makes noise, the valve probably needs to be replaced. Fourth, if the tank fills very slowly, your shutoff valve might not be fully open. Or there could be sediment clogging the supply line. Make sure that shutoff valve is turned all the way counterclockwise. If it's already fully open, try disconnecting the supply line and checking for any debris inside it. Fifth, if you're getting water on the floor around the base of the toilet, that's a different problem entirely. That's usually a failed wax ring and not related to a running toilet. But it's worth mentioning because sometimes people confuse the two. A running toilet is a tank problem. Water on the floor is a seal problem between the toilet and the drain. Sixth, if your toilet runs for just a few seconds every 15 or 20 minutes, even when nobody's using it, that's called phantom flushing. It means water is slowly leaking past the flapper, and when enough drains out the fill, valve kicks on to top off the tank. A new flapper almost always fixes this. Now, for that bonus tip I promised at the beginning. Before you spend any money on parts, try this. Sometimes a flapper that seems bad is actually just dirty. Mineral deposits and algae can build up on the rubber and prevent it from sealing even though the flapper itself isn't worn out. Here's what I do. Shut off the water and flush to empty the tank. Then take the flapper off and clean it with white vinegar and an old toothbrush. Scrub the bottom surface that seals against the drain opening. Also clean the drain seat itself really well. Get all that gunk and mineral buildup off of there. Then put the flapper back on and test it. I'd say about 1 out of every 4 or 5 times, this actually fixes the problem without needing a new flapper at all. You just saved yourself $8 or $10 and a trip to the hardware store. Now, this only works if the rubber is still soft and pliable. If the flapper feels stiff or hard, or if you can see cracks or warping in it, then cleaning won't help and you need a new one. But it's always worth trying the cleaning method first, especially if your flapper is only a year or 2 old. Mineral buildup is really common in areas with hard water, and it can make a perfectly good flapper act like it's failing. One more thing while you're in there. Drop a toilet cleaning tablet into the tank right. Don't do it. Those blue tablets and drop-in cleaners can actually damage your flapper and fill valve over time. The chemicals break down the rubber faster. If you want to keep your toilet clean, stick with bowl cleaners that go in the bowl, not the tank. Your parts will last a lot longer. So that's everything you need to know about fixing a running toilet the right way. We covered how to diagnose the problem, how to replace the flapper and fill valve, how to adjust the float, and how to test your repair to make sure it's done right. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss more videos like this one. And if you have any questions or want to share a tip that's worked for you, drop it in the comments below. I always enjoy hearing from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.